So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set up a WordPress site. Clearly it isn't here, so I won't offend anybody when I do that. Anybody here set up WordPress before? You have. You need, what do you need?
That's how you do it.
What, a web server, right?
Web server. Any Apache.
Yeah, web server, Apache. So,
You need
PHP.
WordPress itself, right?
Yeah, well, you need the WordPress install package. Yeah. Yeah, MySQL. You can use other databases, but that's WordPress. You have a web server. So what you do is you take your base image, you install a web server on it. You install WordPress PHP on that. So you actually usually put both of them on the same line, but you can think of it as layers. Install Apache, then install PHP, and then you're like, oh, I need WordPress. So then you install a WordPress tarball. And then you're like, oh, I need a database. And now if you're doing this in like a production environment, what you do is you spin up another server and you put your database over there. So you can have lots of front ends and one back end storage space. Or if you're running a small shop, then you just put them all on one box. So this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to make that 2-server version of that using containers on my machine. So the first thing is I'm going to create an Apache container. And so this is where I have to go back to my notes. I actually don't have any notes on building an Apache base. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to do a Docker run. Let's see, Docker run -it. And I'm going to use Ubuntu updated. So this is an Ubuntu image that I made where I did apt-get update already in it. So it goes a little faster. And that is, and I'm going to run command bin bash. So now I'm here in my container again, and I get apt-get update, or apt-get install Apache. It's refreshing the package list. That's really weird. I swear I didn't apt-get update in here. That's why I called it update.
Oh, Apache 2?
It's not what?
Apache 2?
What's that?
That's the package name. That's the package name. Apt-get install Apache 2? Or what is making stuff up?
No, apt-get install Apache 2. Oh, this is the CentOS one, sorry. Git install Apache 2. Oh, okay. Yeah, I just made a typo. Oops. So it's downloading Apache and it's installing it. So I'm going through all these steps, and then what I can do after that is I can commit it. So when I commit it, what I'm saying is that read-write layer, I want you to save a copy of that. And I'm going to give it a name, and whenever I want, I can say, based on Apache, run Apache, and Apache is going to say, oh, well, my base is actually Ubuntu updated. And if you look at Ubuntu updated, it's going to say, I need Ubuntu. So the Ubuntu image will be downloaded, it'll apply the Ubuntu updated changes, it'll apply the Apache changes, and it'll present you with that little read-write layer on top to make your changes. So you have this unified, reusable set of views. So I've just installed Apache. I'm going to exit out of here, and I'm going to do a Docker PS just to see, and I'm going to do a PSA, which shows me all of the images, including the ones like this one that just exited a minute ago. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to do a Docker commit Apache 2, I think is what or Apache, that's what or no, sorry. So that's the full name. These container IDs. That's actually a shortened version of the full name, which is a very, very long random gibberish string. You don't really need that much randomness in order to uniquely name stuff on machines usually. And I'm going to give it a name called Apache. Yep. Bash completion works with Docker when you install. It installs the autocomplete. So I'm going to go look at my Docker images, and what you'll see is 14 seconds ago, I created this image called Apache, and it says it's 223 megs in size. But that's the size of the data of all the layers that went into making up that image. So let's just quickly do a search. Let's see, there's the image ID. So Docker, I'm going to do RMI. Okay, so that's the full image name. And I'm going to do sudo find var lib docker. This is where Docker stores its disk stuff. You can move it around if you need to. And I want the name to be that very long string up above. And I want it to be the type of directory. And I want to exec disk use summary human. So I'm going to just find all the directories associated with that image. And what you'll see is that all I installed was Apache. So this is actually the image directory. Some of these are helpers. But that's 18 megs. It looks like a completely different server, but I just used 18 megs. So all I stored were just the little changes I made on top of that. So now the next thing is we need to install WordPress. So let's go ahead and hop over to the WordPress directory, WordPress. And what I'm going to do with WordPress is I'm not going to do that whole manual jump in as bash and do the work and then save it and commit. I'm actually going to automate it. So if I look in this file, it's called Docker file. I'm going to say, okay, starting off with the Apache image, I want you to do an apt-get install mod PHP5. Then I want you to install, actually I'm going to leave this off right here. I'm going to leave that line off. I'm going to comment it out. So I want you to install PHP5, and there's a reason why I'm leaving that off. I'll show you. And then I'm going to go ahead and download the tarball for WordPress. Now, I normally would download this directly from the internet because I don't want to depend on the internet. I have a local copy of it. So this is just copying a cached copy. But this line up here shows you can actually have in your archive. Go get this from the internet and add it to the image whenever you build a new one. So it makes it very easy for your images to be self-updating. And then I'm going to go ahead and run this command, which de-archives that file into the var www.html directory. Remember, it's based on the Apache image, and Apache created that subdirectory for me already. And then I'm going to expose port 80. So I'm going to say, hey, when you run, listen on port 80. Because, well, I mean, it doesn't make any sense to run a web server that doesn't listen. And whenever this Docker image is started, if nobody gives you any commands, start the Apache process. And this is broken up in these little subgroupings because it wants to save you from running a shell command, a copy of Bourne shell, in order to parse these command arguments. So it pushes that parsing onto you. But as a result, your PID1 will be Apache, it won't be bash. So all it'll be running is Apache inside that container. So that's what this image does. So let's go ahead and build this image. So I'm going to do Docker build, and I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it WordPress, and I am going to build the description that's located in the current directory. That's what that dot means. You can have your description somewhere else. And so I'm going to say, do that, build it. And so what it's doing is It's taking the Apache base image. It did an apt-get install to install the dependencies I needed. It's running through that right now. It's downloading. Yep, it's downloading everything. It'll take a minute to download. Yep.
So what about graphical applications? Can you run?
Yeah, no.
No X server.
So it's sort of, I'll show you at the end.
Okay.
But this is, yeah, that's a sticking point. But check out Subuser, by the way.
Subuser.
Subuser, they're doing a lot of development on that end. It's really hard to do graphical applications. X Windows is kind of annoying to work with. If you do it right, you can read everybody else's keyboard input. And if you do it wrong, you have to run it in a little window that, like, via VNC, and it's weird. It's not great yet. It's getting better, though. There's some pretty neat stuff people are doing. And this is a space where I bet you in a year or two, when we come back, that this is going to have gotten way better. So all this red stuff is just the Debian package installer saying, hey, you don't have a real terminal hooked up to me, I'm going to freak out. But it doesn't mean anything. So, okay, so I just built this image. And if I do Docker images, I'll get a list of the images on the machine, and you'll see that there's this new WordPress image. And it's even bigger than the last one. Remember that all is being saved are the changes. So actually, it's just about 40 megs. That's how big that image is. So I'm going to go ahead and fire up WordPress. Docker run IT, or not IT, WordPress. So this is, I'm running a container, and I'm not passing in a command, because the container in that build script said, hey, when you fire up, you have a command, you can execute it, none is given to you. So I'm going to fire it up, and actually, that's not going to work right, because I forgot. Let's see. Docker, I forgot a couple of options. PS. Docker, yes. Docker kill. So I killed off this Docker container. So what I forgot was, I forgot to pass it a -D, which says detach, don't connect to the local interface. So -IT says, I really want to be interactive with you. -T says, I don't want anything to do with you, run in the background. So I have to do that, or else it doesn't work great. And the other thing is, it's a web server. You remember how I said that containers and namespaces, they don't allow the networking to cross? You can have an independent networking namespace. But if I'm running a web server, I sort of want to be able to see what's on it. So I'm going to pass it a flag.p, and I'm going to map port 8000 to 80. So what this is saying is hey, container, you know how you're exposing port 80? I want to see that port on my port 8000 on localhost. Oh, I guess I can't run those two options. So I will get rid of the arrow. So okay, I've got this container fired up, and I'm going to hit on localhost. Let's see. Yeah, there's the screen. So here it is. I'm hitting localhost at port 8000, and there's the web server running in my container. That's great. But remember how I installed Docker? And WordPress, and I installed it in the WordPress directory. And you can't see that, but when I hit the WordPress directory, oh crap, I made a mistake. I forgot to install the MySQL driver for PHP. I guess I'm going to have to do all this stuff from scratch again. It took a while to install everything. I guess I'll make everybody watch while I rebuild the image with the missing dependency. Okay, so I better clean up after myself. So that's the image name. I fired up Docker, so I'll do a Docker kill. Oh, wrong name. Kill that image. Okay, so now it's not running. Yep, it's not running. Okay. So let's go ahead and edit the Docker file. And I stupidly commented that line out. I don't know what I was thinking. But I guess, we'll have to wait for it to build again. Oh well. There's that command. So I'm gonna build a new copy of WordPress. So I'm just gonna write over the old copy. That seems a little faster. It took about the same amount of time, but I was doing more work. So why did it take about the same amount of time? And the reason why is because as Docker builds images, every line of that file, it keeps an intermediate snapshot. So if you build again, it'll only run the changes from that line forward. It won't run any of the changes above it. So actually, if I was really clever and reordered that file, so I put that missing dependency at the bottom, then it would have only run that one step. It would have taken the previous snapshot, applied the change, and popped it out. So it's got lots and lots and lots and lots of layers that it's building up here. But it means that if you make changes, the only work you lose is the work after that change. So now that I've built that new WordPress container, I'm going to go fire it up. And let's go hit that again. There, okay, so let's hit that. Hey, oh, crap. Remember, we need a database, right? Well, there's not that much time. Do you think I can build a database in 2 minutes? Let's see. Let's try this. Okay, so let's go back here, and let's go let's look at the MySQL directory. So of course, it's going to be pretty fast. So, Docker file. So what I have is I'm saying, hey, I would like to create a new Docker image based on this MySQL image. Now this, I already downloaded this, but this is weren't on my computer. It would actually go to the internet and download it automatically. And in fact, the interesting thing is if you look at that MySQL image, it's running Debian Wheezy. I'm running Ubuntu. So it doesn't care what the underlying OS is. Just as long as the kernels are close enough, it's happy. And I'm passing it some variables. I'm setting up some variables. And you can dig into, if you go to the Docker repository, you can see this. So where did I find this? When I pop over to the Docker site, you'll see that on the Docker website, there is this browse. And you hit browse. Well, here. Name a service of some sort, like a database. What's your favorite database? Quick, somebody. Postgres. So, Postgres. I heard Postgres. Why didn't... Let's try that again. There it is. Okay, so there's an official Docker image for Postgres. And if you type this command on the command line, it will download and install a Docker package that's running Postgres. Boom, you've got Postgres installed. And it didn't touch any of your local application bits and pieces. And if you fire it up, it's not going to interact with your local programs at all. So you could run a copy of Postgres on your computer and another one in the container, and they won't talk to each other. So, did you have...
But if you did have Postgres locally installed, would it use
No.
the binaries?
No, it's completely separate environment. If you have it installed in one of the images, then you could theoretically reuse it. So what I did was I grabbed their official MySQL image for this project, and so that's been downloaded. So I'm going to do a Docker build, and I'm going to call it MySQL. Let's see, WordPress. Yeah. And I'm going to build the file in the local directory. Boom. All it was doing was tweaking some variables, so it was very fast to build it. And so now I'm going to fire that guy up. Docker run in detached mode MySQL WordPress. So now I've got a copy of MySQL running on the computer. And in fact, if I do a PS, I think it's, yeah, you can see this process is actually running. And you can see it in my process list. But if I go Docker, let's see, what was it? That was the container name. You know what? Actually, I'm gonna kill it and give it a better name. Docker run WordPress. I'm gonna give it name. The name of WordPress, MySQL WordPress container, so I can tell it from the image. Okay, so now if I do a Docker exec, I can actually, I can get into the runtime environment and take a peek at what's running inside of that MySQL WordPress container. I'm going to run, so this is kind of like that command I was running with bash before. And if I go into the container, I actually don't even have top. I'm going to have PS. Wow. So it's really stripped down in this container. It doesn't have much. Oh, that's awkward. That's a little tricky. I was hoping to show you the processes running. Well, you can look at proc, and you can see that there's 3 processes. And if I look at proc 1 CMD, you can see that init is MySQL. So I'm going to just get out of here real quick. So now I have a MySQL server, but of course, if I pop over here and I fire up my WordPress, hit reload, it can't see the SQL container. They're not talking to each other. So what I need to do is introduce WordPress to MySQL, which means I need to open up a little hole, channel, over which they can talk. And Docker makes this pretty easy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to, let's see, I guess I have to find out what well, actually, I'm just going to show you a little utility that's helpful. There's a GUI for running Docker. So I'm going to just pop in here with the containers I've got. And I've got this WordPress container, and I'm just going to stop it. And then I'm going to kill it. Okay, so I got that I killed that WordPress install, so it's not running anymore. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to run. This is one of the things that's a little annoying about Docker, is that some of the commands on the command line can get a little lengthy. So this is that command that's going to do what I want, which is to allow WordPress and MySQL to talk to each other. And what I'm saying is Docker run in detached mode with the name WordPress container and link the MySQL container to you and give it the name of MySQL. So if you ping MySQL, those pings will go to the other container. So it's going to set the host name inside that container, the host file, up so they see each other. And in fact, I think if you go into the MySQL WordPress container and you ping WordPress container, it'll ping on the other direction too. And open up between those two a connection. And so what they'll be able to do is they'll be able to talk to each other over the ports that they're exposing to each other. Nothing else. They don't have full access. They can just access each other over the ports they declared as interfaces. And then I'm also going to say, since this is the WordPress container, I want to expose port 80 to myself over port 8000 so I can see WordPress. So we'll go ahead and fire that off. And this should, and so now it's running. So now if I go back over here, hop over, I can now connect to that container, and my database is named WordPress, my user is WordPress, my password is WordPress secret, and my database host is MySQL, because remember that host file path that I was mentioning? When I hit submit, so now they're talking to each other, and it's saying, okay, I've talked to the database server, you need to save the configuration details. So I'll do that really quick. Let's see, Docker, is that IT, and I want WordPress container, and I want in bash. So I'm going to log in, var www html WordPress wp config sample php, and I'm just going to paste in that configuration. And now let's go, and now I'm going to exit out of that running container. Now I can save those changes. Let's see, where's my other window? I guess it's, oh, there it is. So run install, and there, cool. So my blog, my username is Tim, my password is Tim, because I am really silly, tim@example.com, and email addresses do not have slashes, allows search engines to index, install WordPress, and poof, I've got WordPress running on my machine. So I can blog to myself, an audience of one. But you can expose this stuff on the internet if you needed to. And so I've got a working WordPress installed. And it's completely, not completely, but very, very rigorously isolated from the rest of the system. So I can go ahead and manage it independently of the other parts. Now, was this production configuration? No, I wouldn't run my database server on the same thing as my front-end server. The security, you are sharing a kernel, so if there's a kernel level exploit, you might be able to jump out of the container. But is this a great way to set up a test environment or play around with technology at home? Yes. If you're running say, an environment where you have lots of customers in the same machine, and you want to isolate them from each other, but you don't want to spend a lot on virtualization, memory and disk, and they don't actually need interactive shells, they just need a server or a service running, this might be an appropriate solution for helping accomplish that stuff. So now what I'm going to do is I have that Docker commit WordPress container. So what I'm going to say is, you know those changes that you made in WordPress container? I want you to save them into the WordPress image. So I'm writing those changes back down into that WordPress image. So now I can do a Docker run WordPress container 2. Or, yeah, here, there it is. Oh, I can't do that because port 8000 is already in use. So I'm actually going to listen on port 8001. Oh, I have an old container. So I'll call it WordPress container 3. So now, I go over to my browser, I copy this URL, paste that in. Port. I choose the port. Well, demo gods are not working with me. But I have been able to run 2 containers at a time.